How's it going, everyone? My name's Sean, and for those of you who aren't familiar, I'm working on getting my master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. And so today, I wanted to look at Dr. Maruki's conversation with Yusuke, which, based on the poll I put up last week on the community tab, Yusuke won by a huge margin. So, you guys voted, and here we are. And the reason I'm calling it a conversation is because, unlike with An, Ryuji, and Makoto, he less does counseling and more so just talks to Yusuke about kind of his counseling philosophy in general. So, if you like this kind of content, you want to see more of it coming from this channel, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so you never miss another upload. But with all that out of the way, let's just jump into it. So, Yusuke's off and running. And you know it's just gonna be a journey whenever Yusuke's involved with something. So he's just kind of introducing himself to Maruki. And this is such a funny session. And he's just kind of telling him that he heard about Maruki's counseling from An and Ryuji. And he literally has Maruki backed into a corner. And, okay. So, I don't know if this is different in Japan. Maybe it is. I can't imagine that it is. But this is a complete breach of confidentiality. Like, straight from the get-go. So, I'm gonna throw up a part of the ACA, so the American Counseling Association's Code of Ethics on screen right here. And essentially, it's very important for you as a counselor to respect the confidentiality of your clients. So the thing that I have up on screen right now says, counselors protect the confidential information of prospective and current clients. Counselors disclose information only with appropriate consent or sound legal or ethical judgment. So in this instance, this is a student from another high school entirely. While he clearly knows An and Ryuji, Maruki has no idea what his relationship is with them, and moreover than that, even if he did know that they're friends, An and Ryuji, at least from what we see, do not give explicit consent for him to talk about being in counseling with them to Yusuke Kitagawa. You need to be very explicit as to who you are allowed to disclose this information to. So this is a total breach of confidentiality, and even though it was just saying, yeah, I counsel them, that's not okay in any way. So, very unethical by the good doctor. But let's see where this conversation kind of goes. And he's flattered that he's taken a very explicit interest in his counseling. Yusuke, oh my. Yeah, Maruki, you're an awkward dude to begin with. But there is definitely kind of a misunderstanding here. Oh, but that's why we love Yusuke. But okay, he wants to watch the counseling. And so okay, at least he knows that's not okay. Because it's really not. So there are a couple instances in which individuals can observe or sit in on a counseling session, but there's a lot of kind of red tape that surrounds that. So, for instance, I'll just use my experience. For instance, I'm an intern right now, and so I'm able to sit in on counseling sessions. With that being said, though, we need the client's explicit permission, and I have to have all of my clearances to be able to sit in on those sessions. Now, we might be able to, as a counselor, you could bring in outside individuals to sit in or even kind of help with the therapeutic process. But again, you need to get explicit permission and have a very clearly defined therapeutic intention for this. And so just having Yusuke, just out of sheer curiosity, sit in on one of Maruki's sessions, very, very bad idea. And so I'm glad he said this. That's okay. He's thinking, he has an idea. Okay. So we know that they just kind of sit down here and have a chit chat. And I would hesitate to call this like counseling, because in this instance, it's more so just a conversation, and Maruki's taking time out of his day. You can't really call this, in particular, counseling. So, okay, time skip, and it looks like in this time skip is really when a lot of the meat happens, with Yusuke telling Maruki all about his past, his history with Madarame, and all of the things he's kind of gone through up to this point. And so as we continue moving forward, Yusuke is very much kind of acting as throughout this entire conversation. It's not really a counseling session, and I don't want to go into it acting like it is. Because really, Yusuke acts as kind of the only one who really questions what Maruki is doing in this counseling and how he's doing it. And so he's saying, I never thought that counseling would be like this. To which Maruki responds. And so I'd actually kind of disagree with Maruki here. I can see what he's saying. It's less counseling and more rapport building. And while I think rapport building, as we've talked about on Ryuji and Makoto's sessions, rapport building is absolutely huge. And so while it's not technically like a therapeutic technique to build rapport with your clients, it's so important to have these moments where you're kind of building that trust. You're allowing the client to really start opening up to a degree that they are comfortable with. And so in this instance, well, again, I'm not going to call it a counseling session. It's more of a conversation between the two of them. He is permitting Yusuke to really open up and share a lot of these feelings that he may not share with that many people, which in turn, I would say that rapport building is very therapeutic in nature because it allows you to start opening up. Ideally, it's kind of taking a little bit of the weight off in this particular context so that maybe we can start in future sessions, start exploring some of the more underlying feelings and emotions. And a lot of clients will take it at different paces. Some clients, like An, are much more open to sharing a lot of information about themselves and their experience, kind of straight from the get-go, whereas others, like Ryuji, might be a lot more closed off and less forthcoming with this information. So, while I agree with him, this is definitely building rapport. I don't want to say that building rapport isn't counseling, because sometimes just having someone who is there to listen and so for you to have an outlet to get this stuff out can be therapeutic. It's not the only thing that happens in counseling, but it is an important piece. And yeah, always start with having them tell the counselor a little bit about themselves, which I agree, that's incredibly important because you can't have an effective relationship without that self-disclosure. And yeah, I couldn't have said it any better, Yusuke. A method of self-reflection that relies on speaking with another person so as to sort through one's own emotions. Sometimes you just need to throw it out there into the void because maybe you've never articulated your feelings or your thoughts or your experiences before. And so even the simple act of just getting it out can be a good start to this process. So Yusuke he's really taking like a duck to water with this whole understanding of counseling thing, which is kind of what he wanted to know in the first place anyways. It's just to understand that counseling. Cross-examination, that's a little bit of a harsh phrase there, but I mean, in a way. But yes, Maruki is very right. There shouldn't be any cross-examining in a counseling session, especially from the counselor to the client, because if it feels like you're being interrogated. Maruki said in a previous session, this isn't an interrogation. It shouldn't feel like an interrogation. It shouldn't feel like a cross-examination. It should feel like a safe space for you to be able to disclose what you need to disclose and have that aid, that support, and that guidance so that you can begin discovering ways that you can begin helping yourself and kind of moving past whatever might be whatever you might be dealing with in that particular moment, or that you've been dealing with for a while, so that you can kind of rise past that, or at least be able to mediate it. So I agree with you, Maruki. Shouldn't be any cross-examining. Guide patients to a positive direction so that they can improve their lives. Okay. So I'm holding off for a second because I know what Yusuke says next. And I think it's very telling. So if you don't want any spoilers for the third semester, click off of this video right now. Come back once you finished it. If you don't care about spoilers, stay on. Yusuke has a better understanding of counseling than Dr. Maruki does, because this not only foreshadows Dr. Maruki's entire kind of motivation as a character in the third semester through his actualization, which essentially is just him fixing everyone's issues in the way that he sees fit, not necessarily how they see fit, but how he sees their issues need to be resolved. And Yusuke says it perfectly. If you're the one leading them to the conclusions, are they really making the choices for themselves? No, they're not. And so that's not empowering. That's telling them what to do. And so that almost makes the counselor kind of, like a crutch. You don't want to become a crutch for an individual. You want to help them to lift themselves up and provide support, provide advocacy, provide aid in a lot of ways that you can, but make sure that they are able to overcome whatever they're dealing with their own strength, so that essentially that the ideal situation is that they won't need you anymore. You are there for them as long as they need you, and you should be actively there for them as long as they are able to utilize your services or need to utilize your services. But the goal should always be that the client can stand on their own 2 feet and not need you, or move past, or set more goals to work on something different in that counseling. Obviously, if they relapse, that they can come back, but the goal should be to move forward. You're not fixing their problems. They are able to build themselves up, and you're helping to facilitate that growth and that development for themselves. So Yusuke is so right on the money here. Isn't that just submitting to another person's will? Yes, it is. And he says that in all honesty, I think that there are people out there who think that. Okay. the world confines people to certain frames of mind sometimes. Yes, okay, yeah, sometimes people do have maladaptive thinking patterns. And so as a counselor, though, while you are able to challenge those maladaptive thinking patterns, and if something is inherently harmful to oneself or others, then yes, you need to actively work with the client to take an active look at that and start to try and prevent those maladaptive thinking patterns. But it is not your job to say, this is the right thing for you to do. Trust me, I know. I'm the counselor. I know what is right for you always and every time, because it's not true. I'll just be honest. It's not true. Yes, counselors have a lot of insights and a lot of strengths, and they have a lot of resources that can be highly beneficial. And they will provide tools and resources for clients to try out to see, does this work for you? Does that work for you? Is this reaching your goals? And goal setting is such an important part of counseling. But if you are the one forcing that movement and making them do something that maybe they're not comfortable with, or maybe you're trying to force an ideology on them and they think, oh, I'm fine now, and then they leave, and then they aren't able to actually integrate that outside of counseling. He's so within his own mindset and within his own thought processes that I am shocked that he was ever able to become a counselor in the first place. The thing about counseling is that you should always be looking to grow and to learn. Always. And that's the case with any profession. You should always be looking to grow, expand your field of understanding, your scope of understanding, so that you can continuously be a better counselor. And so he thinks that it is his role to release people's minds because he knows what's best for them, which really, really alludes to what he does with his actualization. But, oh my goodness, this is very much a conversation about his ideology and his thought processes as a counselor. It's not really, like I said, it's not really a counseling session. It's more just him explaining why he does what he does. So he's very much the results, a means to an end kind of person. And so even if the means aren't great, as long as the end result appears to be good, that's what matters to him, which is, And then Yusuke closes out, thank you very much. And then he kind of stops him to ask what his greatest wish is. And we know that this is him being manipulative. He wants to know, if I am able to lift all of your pain and release all of that, which he eventually does in his actualization, what would you want? And so this is actually a twisted, I'm going to let it ride here for a second, but this is kind of a twisted form of a real therapeutic technique from solution-focused brief therapy, which is a kind of therapy that a lot of individuals will use, which is called the miracle question. And essentially what the miracle question is if a miracle were to happen and you were to get your greatest wish granted, or you were able to wake up in a perfect world or an actualized world, what would that look like to you? And counselors use this as a means of setting goals or figuring out what the client actually wants. And so let's say that Yusuke wants a sensei and wants to be able to have his brush guided by that sensei. So now we can start kind of working towards, okay, how can we kind of reach that goal? What steps can we take so that you are able to get yourself to that point and closer to that more idyllic world. Obviously, he doesn't have any interest in using it for a therapeutic sense, more so in a, I'm going to change the world maybe someday. He doesn't know he's going to become God, but he does eventually. And so, how can I do this for you kind of way? And Maruki just kind of takes that in, and then the session's kind of over. And we have this little exchange, their goodbyes. And so this conversation really, it shows us what Maruki's true colors really are. He's not a counselor. I mean, he clearly hasn't progressed like I was hoping he was in that Makoto session, and we still haven't looked at the Haru session. Maybe he does a little bit better in that one than this. I really hope so. But it clearly shows that he has no intention of being an empowering individual for his clients. He wants to fix the problems, and whatever means that takes, he'll do it. At this point in the story, he's already brainwashed Sumire. We haven't talked about it yet, but he's done a lot of questionable stuff ethically with Joker in terms of their therapeutic relationship. And he's had spotty stuff in all of the different sessions that really, those mistakes were narratively driven. And I think that, I say this in every episode, but I think that the writers are just absolutely genius. But this shows his blatant misunderstanding of what a counselor's role should be. Not to fix the problem, but to help empower, like Yusuke was saying. Yusuke has a better understanding, and his questions lead us to see that the writers very explicitly knew what a counselor's role should be, and how Dr. Maruki was so not that. He's a researcher by nature. He was researching cognitive science. And so because that is his trade, that's what he's interested in. He wants to use cognitive science, and being a counselor is just kind of a short-term gig that he probably never really took that seriously. Or while I'm sure he wants to help people, he clearly wants to help people. His intentions are good, it's just his means are really awful. And so he's not a good counselor. He has good moments, like in the session with Makoto, but he is not a good counselor by any means. He breaks ethical codes. He could potentially do harm to clients in some of the stuff he does, like in the session with Ryuji. I'm excited to look at his session with Haru. I really hope it's good, and that's the next session that we're going to be looking at. But this shows us what he's really like, and how, well, I was hoping he'd grown, and I think that his use of techniques has. He as a counselor, he shouldn't be a counselor. But that'll do it for today's video, guys, and I want to pass the question off to you. What do you think of Dr. Maruki? I personally love him as a character, but hate him as a counselor. But I would love to hear your thoughts up to this point with all things considered. So leave those thoughts in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, why not liking this video, why not subscribing to the channel, and why not even ringing that notification bell so you never miss another upload. And as always, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, a fantastic rest of your week, and a fantastic rest of your month. And I will see you in the next video. Later.